The blue glow of monitor screens lit up Lieutenant Commander Samantha Wells's face as she sat at her station aboard Sentinel-1. The orbital defense platform hung silently above Earth, its sensors constantly scanning the depths of space. Samantha had been on duty for nearly 8 hours and her shift was almost over. She reached for her coffee mug and took a sip of the cold liquid. That was when she noticed it, a strange pattern on her communications array. At first, she thought it might be a glitch in the system, but after running a quick diagnostic, she confirmed the signal was real. It pulsed with an unusual rhythm, unlike anything in the human communication database. "Captain Garcia," she called out, "I'm picking up an anomalous signal. It doesn't match any known Earth protocols." Captain Daniel Garcia moved across the control room to her station. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and deep worry lines etched into his face from 15 years of service. "Show me," he said, leaning over her shoulder. Samantha pulled up the visual representation of the signal. It appeared as a series of complex waveforms on her screen, pulsing in a pattern that seemed almost deliberate. "Origin?" Garcia asked. "Preliminary trace suggests it's coming from the Epsilon Eridani system, sir, about 10.5 light-years away." Garcia's eyebrows rose slightly. "That's well beyond our normal communication range. Run it through the decryption algorithms." Samantha's fingers flew across the touchscreen as she initiated the decryption process. The advanced computer systems of Sentinel-1 began breaking down the signal, searching for patterns, comparing it to every known form of communication in human history. After several minutes, the computer beeped. "Sir, I think it's an SOS," Samantha said, her voice quiet with awe. "Or at least the universal equivalent." Garcia straightened up. "You're certain?" "The pattern repeats in the mathematical sequence we'd expect for a distress call. It's deliberate, sir. Someone out there is asking for help." Within an hour, the bridge of Sentinel-1 was filled with additional personnel. The signal had been isolated, recorded, and transmitted to Earth's United Defense Council headquarters in Geneva. Samantha watched as communication specialists and xenolinguists pored over the data she had discovered. "Good work, Lieutenant Commander," Garcia told her. "This could be the most significant communication we've ever received." Samantha nodded, but her mind was racing with questions. Who had sent the signal? Why were they calling for help? And why had the signal reached Earth of all places? 3 hours later, Admiral Olivia Martinez arrived on Sentinel-1. As the highest-ranking officer in the United Earth Defense Force, her presence signaled the seriousness of the situation. Samantha stood at attention as the Admiral entered the conference room where the senior staff had gathered. "At ease," Martinez said. She was a compact woman with short gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Tell me what we know." Garcia gestured to the large display screen on the wall. "The signal originated from the Epsilon Eridani system. Our analysis confirms it's a distress call. Based on the radiation patterns and signal degradation, it was sent approximately 3 months ago." Admiral Martinez studied the data. "This isn't just a distress call," she said after a moment. "Look at these energy signatures, the background radiation. Whoever sent this was under attack, a large-scale attack." A silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. "Recommendations?" Martinez asked. The science officer cleared his throat. "We could send a response signal, but it would take over 10 years to reach them." "By then it would be too late," Garcia said. "If they're under attack, they need help. Now." Martinez nodded slowly. "Then we send a fleet." The words hung in the air. No human ship had ever ventured beyond the solar system on a military mission. The few exploratory missions to nearby stars had been purely scientific in nature. "The Harbinger is nearly complete," Garcia suggested. "Along with the support vessels Vanguard, Sentinel, and Guardian. They could be ready for deep space deployment within 2 weeks." Martinez considered this. "Who would you recommend to command such a mission, Captain?" "Commander Richard Blackwood," Garcia said without hesitation. "He has more combat experience than anyone else in the fleet, and he's been training crews for deep space missions for the past 3 years." "And for first contact situations?" Martinez asked. Dr. Catherine Webb is our top xenolinguist. She helped establish communication protocols with the Galactic Consortium delegates. Martinez nodded. Make it happen. I'll inform the Council of our decision. Humanity is about to make its first interstellar rescue mission. As the meeting broke up, Samantha found herself assigned to the analysis team. Her job was to continue studying the signal, trying to extract any additional information that might help the rescue fleet. She worked late into the night, running the signal through various filters and analysis programs. As the station entered its night cycle, and most of the crew retired to their quarters, she remained at her post, driven by a sense that there was something more to discover. It was nearly 3 a.m. when she found it. A hidden pattern within the signal, almost like a message encoded within the distress call itself. She immediately called Alan Foster, one of the junior analysts who had been helping with the decryption. "Look at this," she said when he arrived, bleary-eyed from being woken up. "There's a secondary signal embedded within the SOS. It's not just a call for help, it's a data packet." Foster rubbed his eyes and studied the screen. "You're right. Let me try to isolate it." They worked together for another hour, carefully extracting the hidden data. When they finally managed to separate it from the main signal, what they found sent a chill down Samantha's spine. "These are observation records," Foster said, his voice barely above a whisper, "of Earth. They've been watching us." The data contained fragments of information about human civilization, military capabilities, technological development, even biological information about human physiology. The aliens who had sent the distress call had been monitoring Earth for decades, perhaps longer. "They know exactly what they're asking for," Samantha said. "They're not just calling for help from anyone who might hear. They're calling for us, specifically." Foster looked up at her, his face pale in the blue light of the monitors. But why? Why would anyone deliberately call Deathworlders for help? The question hung in the air between them. Earth had learned of its classification as a death world during the first contact with the Galactic Consortium 5 years earlier. The alien delegates had been visibly uncomfortable on Earth, struggling with the high gravity, oxygen-rich atmosphere, and extreme temperature variations. They had explained that in the galactic community, planets like Earth were considered dangerous, and the species that evolved on them were viewed with caution, even fear. "Whatever they're facing," Samantha said finally, "it must be worse than dealing with us." As dawn broke over the curve of Earth visible through the observation windows, Samantha and Foster presented their findings to Captain Garcia and Admiral Martinez. The discovery added a new dimension to the rescue mission, one that raised as many questions as it answered. 2 weeks later, Samantha stood in the observation lounge of Sentinel-1, watching as the human rescue fleet assembled in high orbit. The Harbinger, with its distinctive blue-gray hull, formed the core of the small armada. It was humanity's first true warship, designed for deep space operations, nearly a kilometer in length. Around it, the support vessels took up formation, their engines glowing as they prepared for the journey to Epsilon Eridani. "They're really going," Foster said, standing beside her. Samantha nodded. "Into the unknown. To rescue aliens who've been spying on us. To answer a call for help." She corrected him. "Whatever their reasons for calling us, someone out there needs help, and that's what we do." As they watched, the fleet's engines flared to life. The Alcubierre drives engaged, creating bubbles of warped space-time around each vessel. In a flash of light that briefly outshone the sun, the fleet disappeared, carrying humanity's hopes and fears into the depths of interstellar space. The massive form of the Harbinger cut through the darkness of space, its blue-gray hull reflecting the distant stars. Commander Richard Blackwood stood on the observation deck, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared out at the endless void. 2 weeks had passed since their departure from Earth, and the reality of their mission weighed heavily on his shoulders. Richard was tall and lean, with short gray hair and a face weathered by years of service. He had fought in the Mars conflict, leading troops against the separatist factions. But this mission was different. This time they were heading into completely unknown territory. The door to the observation deck slid open with a soft hiss. Richard did not need to turn around to know who it was. "Trouble sleeping, Dr. Webb?" he asked. Dr. Catherine Webb moved to stand beside him. She was in her early 40s with dark skin and intelligent eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "The same as you, Commander," she replied. "Still thinking about Foster's discovery?" Richard nodded. "They've been watching us, studying us. They know exactly what we are and what we're capable of." "And they called us anyway," Catherine said. "Whatever they're facing must be worse than the prospect of dealing with Deathworlders." The term still felt strange to Richard. Earth had learned of its classification as a death world during the first contact with the Galactic Consortium 5 years earlier. The aliens had been shocked by Earth's high gravity, toxic oxygen levels, extreme temperature variations, and the aggressive evolutionary adaptations of its native species, particularly humans. What kind of threat would make someone call for help from a species they fear? Richard wondered aloud. Catherine had no answer for him. They stood in silence, watching the stars streak by outside the reinforced viewport. The Harbinger was not traveling alone. Behind it came the support vessels: the Vanguard, specialized for medical and humanitarian aid; the Sentinel, equipped with advanced sensors and scientific equipment; and the Guardian, built for defense and security. Together, they formed humanity's first interstellar rescue fleet. Deep within the Harbinger, Chief Engineer Vincent Rodriguez was running final checks on the experimental Alcubierre drive that propelled them through space. The journey to Epsilon Eridani would take decades at conventional speeds, but the warp system would deliver them in just under 3 months. Vincent wiped sweat from his brow as he examined the readouts. The warp bubble was stable, but the energy consumption was higher than expected. He made a note to inform Commander Blackwood at the morning briefing. "How's our baby doing?" asked his assistant, a young engineer named Susan Chen. "She's hungry," Vincent replied, pointing to the energy consumption charts. "But she's running smooth. We'll make it to Epsilon Eridani on schedule." In another section of the ship, Security Chief Lisa Donovan supervised her team as they ran combat drills. Lisa was a compact woman with red hair and a serious expression. She had served with Commander Blackwood during the Mars conflict and trusted him with her life. "Again," she ordered as her team finished the exercise. "Faster this time. We don't know what we'll face out there, so we need to be ready for anything." Her second-in-command, Sergeant Paul Grant, nodded and reset the simulation. The security team moved into position, their training weapons at the ready. The drill simulated, an alien boarding party attempting to take control of the ship. Admiral Martinez had insisted on full combat readiness for this mission. "If they're calling Deathworlders for help," she had told Commander Blackwood during the final briefing, "be prepared for the worst kind of fight." As the weeks passed, life aboard the fleet settled into a routine. Daily briefings, maintenance, checks, training exercises. But the psychological effects of deep space travel began to take their toll. Dr. Peter Collins, the fleet's chief psychologist, noted an increase in reported sleep disturbances and anxiety among the crew. "It's what we're calling warp isolation," he explained during one of the senior staff meetings. Cut off from the rest of the universe, with nothing visible beyond the warp field but distorted starlight, many crew members are experiencing feelings of intense isolation and paranoia. Commander Blackwood nodded. "Recommendations? More group activities, regular exercise, and I suggest we increase the brightness of the ship's lighting to better simulate Earth's day-night cycle." Richard approved the changes immediately. Crew morale would be crucial for the success of their mission. 6 weeks into their journey, Catherine Webb worked late in her quarters, reviewing the alien distress signal once again. Despite weeks of analysis, she felt there was something they were still missing. She isolated different frequency bands, applied various filters, and studied the pattern for the 100th time. Then she saw it, a subtle variation in the signal that didn't match the rest of the transmission. It wasn't a flaw or degradation, it was deliberate, another message hidden within the first. Catherine worked through the night, her excitement growing as she isolated this hidden message and began decryption. By morning, she had translated enough to be deeply concerned. She immediately requested a meeting with Commander Blackwood and the senior staff. They gathered in the briefing room, faces serious as Catherine explained her discovery. "It's a warning," she said, displaying the decrypted message fragments on the room's main screen. "Hidden within the SOS. The translation isn't perfect, but it seems to say beware the hive or possibly collective." "A warning about what they're fighting?" asked Security Chief Donovan. "Or a warning about themselves," suggested Chief Engineer Rodriguez. Richard studied the message fragments on the screen. "Continue working on the decryption, Doctor. I want to know exactly what we're flying into before we drop out of warp." As they approached the halfway point of their journey, the fleet encountered something unexpected. The Sentinel detected an anomaly just beyond the edge of their warp bubble. Another ship, somehow matching their impossible velocity. "How is that possible?" Richard asked when the report reached him. "No known propulsion system should be able to pace us at warp speed." "Unknown, sir," replied the sensor officer, "but the readings are clear. There's definitely something out there." For 3 days, the mysterious vessel shadowed them. All attempts at communication failed. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the unknown ship vanished. "Keep sensors at maximum range," Richard ordered. "I want to know immediately if that ship returns." The encounter left the crew uneasy. They had assumed they would be the first to arrive at Epsilon Eridani, but now it seemed they might not be alone. In the medical bay, Dr. Julia Taylor prepared her team for possible casualties. They had no idea what injuries they might need to treat, human or alien. "We've stocked every medical supply we could think of," she told Commander Blackwood during his inspection. "But treating alien physiology will be challenging without more information." "Do your best, Doctor," Richard replied. "That's all any of us can do." As they passed the 2-month mark of their journey, anticipation grew throughout the fleet. They were entering the final stretch. Soon they would reach Epsilon Eridani and discover who had sent the distress call. Richard stood once more on the observation deck, looking out at the distorted stars. Whatever awaited them at their destination, he knew one thing for certain. Humanity's first step into the wider galaxy would not be the peaceful exploration they had once envisioned. They were coming as rescuers, yes, but they were also coming as warriors, Deathworlders answering a desperate call for help. The final week of their journey to Epsilon Eridani brought new challenges for the crew. The Alcubierre drive began to show signs of strain, the energy fields fluctuating as they pushed the experimental technology to its limits. Chief Engineer Vincent Rodriguez barely left the engine room, his eyes red from lack of sleep as he worked to keep the warp bubble stable. "How bad is it?" Commander Richard Blackwood asked during one of his visits to the engine section. Vincent wiped grease from his hands with a rag. "We can make it, sir, but I can't promise a smooth ride. The drive was never tested for a journey this long." Richard nodded. "Do what you can. We're too close to turn back now." Throughout the ship, preparations for arrival intensified. Security Chief Lisa Donovan ran her team through combat simulations, day and night. Dr. Julia Taylor stocked the medical bay with additional supplies. Dr. Catherine Webb continued her work on decrypting the hidden warning message. 10 days before their scheduled arrival, Catherine called an emergency meeting with the senior staff. "I've managed to translate more of the hidden message," she said, her voice tight with concern. "It's definitely a warning, and it's more detailed than we initially thought." She displayed the decrypted text on the briefing room screen. "Beware the collective. They consume minds. Deathworlders immune. Our last hope." "Consume minds?" Lisa asked, her hand unconsciously moving to the sidearm at her hip. "What does that mean?" "I'm not sure," Catherine admitted. "The phrasing suggests some form of mental assimilation or control. But the message is clear on one point. Whatever this collective is, humans are somehow immune to it." "And that's why they called us," Richard said, putting the pieces together. "Not just because we're strong or well-armed, but because we have a natural defense against their enemy. That's my assessment as well, Catherine agreed. Something in our biology makes us resistant to whatever weapon or ability this collective uses. Richard stood up, his decision made. We continue as planned, but with increased caution. I want all personnel briefed on this new information. If we're heading into a war zone, everyone needs to be prepared. 3 days before their arrival, the mysterious ship that had shadowed them earlier returned. This time, sensors detected it directly ahead of their path. It's waiting for us, the sensor officer reported, holding position just outside our maximum weapons range. Still no response to communication attempts? Richard asked. None, sir. It's just sitting there. Richard studied the sensor readings. The unknown vessel was smaller than the Harbinger, but appeared to have a similar design to the ships used by the Galactic Consortium. That suggested it might be from one of the known spacefaring civilizations rather than a completely new species. Options? He asked his senior staff. We could alter course, suggested Navigation Officer Ryan Kelly. Add a few hours to our journey but avoid direct contact. Lisa Donovan shook her head. That might be seen as a sign of weakness. I recommend maintaining course but raising shields and bringing weapons to standby. Richard considered both recommendations. We'll maintain course, but I want a careful approach. Shields at maximum. Weapons ready but not targeted. Let's not provoke a confrontation if we can avoid it. As the fleet approached the waiting vessel, tension on the bridge reached its peak. Every officer remained at high alert, ready to respond to any hostile action. But when they came within visual range, the mysterious ship simply disappeared, fading from both visual and sensor detection, as if it had never been there. What just happened? Richard demanded. Did they jump to warp? No warp signature detected, sir, the sensor officer replied, confusion evident in his voice. It's as if they just vanished. Richard frowned. Keep sensors at maximum sensitivity. I want to know if that ship returns. The encounter left the crew uneasy. Was it a test, a warning, or something else entirely? With less than 24 hours until their arrival at Epsilon Eridani, Richard called his senior officers together one final time. Tomorrow we drop out of warp and face whatever awaits us, he said, looking at each of them in turn. We've come further than any human expedition in history. Whatever happens next, I want you all to know that I couldn't ask for a better crew. He turned to Dr. Peter Collins. How's the crew holding up? Anxious but ready, Peter replied. The closer we get to our destination, the more the sense of purpose has overcome the warp isolation effects. They want to help. They want to make this mission a success. Richard nodded. Good. And the translation work, Dr. Webb? Catherine looked tired but determined. No further progress on the hidden message, but I've refined our first contact protocols, based on the distress signal patterns. If whoever sent the SOS is still alive, we should be able to communicate with them. Weapons and defense systems are at full capacity, Lisa reported next. All security teams are on standby rotation. We can have a full combat response ready within 90 seconds of an alert. The medical bay is prepared for casualties, Dr. Taylor added, though treating alien physiology will be challenging without more information. Vincent gave the final report. The warp drive will get us there, Commander, but I recommend an extended cooldown period before attempting a return journey. The system needs time to stabilize. Understood, Richard said. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, our priority is responding to the distress call. As the meeting ended, Richard remained in the briefing room alone, reviewing all the information they had gathered during their journey. The distress signal, the hidden warning, the mysterious shadowing ship. None of it painted a clear picture of what they would find in the Epsilon Eridani system. He pulled up the original message that Alan Foster had discovered back on Earth. Evidence that the aliens had been monitoring humanity for decades. Why watch Earth for so long? What had they been looking for? Sleep eluded Richard that night. He spent hours in the ship's holographic training room, running combat simulations based on the limited information they had. His scenarios ranged from peaceful first contact to full-scale planetary invasions. He wanted to be ready for anything. In the early hours of the morning, as the ship's clock ticked closer to their arrival time, Richard returned to the observation deck. The distorted view of stars outside the warp bubble had become a familiar sight during their long journey. Soon, he whispered to himself, soon we'll know. Catherine found him there as the final hour approached. She didn't speak, simply stood beside him as they both contemplated the unknown that awaited them. Are we ready for this? She finally asked. Humanity's first interstellar rescue mission. Our first real step into the wider galaxy. Richard turned to look at her. We have to be. Someone out there called for help and we answered. Whatever happens next, we stay true to that. The ship's intercom system crackled to life. Commander, Blackwood to the bridge, preparing for warp exit in 15 minutes. Richard straightened his uniform. Time to face the music, Doctor. Together they made their way to the bridge. The senior officers were already at their stations, faces set with determination. On the main view screen, a countdown timer showed the minutes remaining until they dropped out of warp. All stations report ready, announced the communications officer. Shields at maximum, Lisa confirmed. Sensors ready for full system scan, added the science officer. Richard took his command chair, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. Take us out of warp. The countdown reached 0. The warp bubble collapsed, and the fleet of human vessels emerged into the Epsilon Eridani system, ready to face whatever destiny awaited them among the stars. The human fleet emerged from warp at the edge of the Epsilon Eridani system. The bridge of the Harbinger fell silent as the crew took in the view on the main screen. A yellow-orange star burned at the center of the system, with several planets orbiting around it. Full sensor sweep, Commander Richard Blackwood ordered, his voice cutting through the silence. I want to know exactly what we're dealing with. The science officer's hands moved rapidly over the controls. Scanning now, sir. 5 planets detected, plus several smaller bodies. 4th planet shows signs of technology and artificial structures. Life signs? Richard asked. Scanning, yes, sir. The 4th planet and its orbital stations are showing multiple life signs, but the readings are unusual. Unusual how? The science officer looked puzzled. They're fluctuating somehow. I've never seen readings like these. Richard turned to Communications Officer Maria Diaz. Any transmissions? Anything matching the distress signal? Maria adjusted her equipment. Yes, sir. We're picking up communications from the 4th planet and a large space station in orbit around it. The signal patterns match the distress call we received. Put us on course for the space station, Richard ordered. Maintain yellow alert status. All security teams on standby. As the fleet moved deeper into the system, the sensors provided more detailed information. The 4th planet was smaller than Earth, with 2 small moons and a large space station in orbit. The station appeared damaged, with sections venting atmosphere. My God, breathed Dr. Catherine Webb as she studied the visual feed. Look at the size of that station. The space station was enormous, nearly 5 kilometers across, with a circular design that reminded Richard of a wheel with spokes connecting to a central hub. Damage analysis? He asked. Multiple hull breaches, reported Lisa Donovan, studying the tactical display. Power fluctuations throughout the structure. It looks like they were attacked, and recently. Richard nodded grimly. Any sign of the attackers? None detected, sir, but our sensor range is limited. As they approached the damaged station, Maria's console lit up. Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the station. They're hailing us. Richard straightened his uniform. On screen. The main view screen flickered, and then displayed an image that made several crew members gasp. The being on the screen was unlike anything humans had encountered before. Its body appeared crystalline, with light pulsing through internal structures, in complex patterns. It had no recognizable face, just a central cluster of what looked like sensory organs. You have come, the alien said, its voice translated through Catherine's linguistics matrix. The translation was flat but understandable. The Deathworlders have answered our call, Richard stepped forward. I am Commander Richard Blackwood of the United Earth Defense Force. We received your distress signal and have come to render assistance. The alien's crystalline body flickered with pulses of blue light. I am Nexus 7, coordinator of Harmony Station. We face extinction. The collective has found us. Catherine moved to stand beside Richard. We found a hidden warning in your message about a collective that consumes minds. Yes, Nexus 7 responded. The X-Caitharis Collective, a species that assimilates other sentient beings, not their bodies, but their consciousness, their knowledge. They absorb minds into their neural network. We Lumidians have fought them for centuries, but our latest defense system failed. Now they come for this station, our last major outpost. And you called us? Humans? Deathworlders? Richard asked, trying to understand. The collective assimilates through neural connection, Nexus 7 explained. Their biology is incompatible with yours, your aggressive immune systems, your neurotransmitter configurations. They cannot interface with Deathworlder physiology. You are immune to their primary weapon. Lisa stepped forward, her face suspicious. You've been watching Earth. You knew what we were capable of. Yes, Nexus 7 admitted. We have observed your species for generations. Your violence frightened us, but your capacity for self-sacrifice, for protecting others, this gave us hope. The collective arrives in 14 of your Earth days. Will you help us? Before Richard could respond, alarms blared across the bridge. Sir, the tactical officer called out. Multiple ships just dropped out of FTL at the system's edge. Configuration unknown, but they're moving fast toward this position. On the screen, Nexus 7's crystalline form pulsed rapidly with red light. They have found us sooner than expected. The collective comes. Richard turned to his crew. Battle stations. All ships to defensive positions around the station. He turned back to the screen. We'll help you, Nexus 7, but we need to know everything about these attackers right now. There is no time to explain in detail, Nexus 7 said. The collective ships are not vessels as you understand them, but biological constructs, living organisms adapted for space travel. They attack by launching smaller organisms that breach hulls and deploy neural parasites. These parasites connect to the nervous systems of their victims, linking them to the collective consciousness. And conventional weapons? Richard asked. Partially effective. Their outer membranes can absorb tremendous energy, but sustained fire will eventually penetrate. Their internal systems are more vulnerable, especially to radiation and extreme heat. Permission to come aboard your station, Richard said. We need to coordinate our defense. Granted, Nexus 7 replied. I will meet your team in Docking Bay 7. Hurry, Commander, the collective shows no mercy. Richard turned to his officers. Lisa, you're with me. Catherine, we'll need you for translation. Vincent, start working on modifying our weapons to maximize radiation output and heat generation. What about the rest of the fleet? Asked Lisa. Richard considered for a moment. The Guardian will protect the damaged sections of the station. The Vanguard will prepare for casualties and possible evacuation of the Lumidians. The Harbinger and Sentinel will engage the collective ships directly. As the orders were relayed, Richard, Lisa, and Catherine made their way to the shuttle bay. A small craft was prepared to transport them to the Lumidian station. We came here expecting a rescue mission, Lisa said as they boarded the shuttle. Looks like we found a war instead. We knew it was a possibility, Richard replied. Now, we fight. The shuttle launched from the Harbinger, crossing the short distance to the massive space station. As they approached, they could see the damage more clearly. Entire sections had been torn open to the vacuum of space, metal twisted, and bent from some immense force. Those aren't weapon impacts, Lisa noted. It looks like something tore through the hull physically. The shuttle docked at Bay 7 as instructed. As the airlock cycled, Richard checked his sidearm. Lisa did the same. Remember, Richard said. We're guests here, but stay alert. We still don't know everything about our new allies. The inner door opened, revealing a wide docking bay filled with alien craft of various designs. Standing nearby was Nexus 7. its crystalline body glowing with soft blue light. Behind it stood a group of similar beings, though each had slightly different configurations of their crystal structures. "Commander Blackwood," Nexus 7 said. "Welcome to Harmony Station. I regret that our first meeting must occur under such dire circumstances." Richard stepped forward. "We're here to help, Nexus 7. But we need to move quickly. Those ships will be here soon." "Indeed," Nexus 7 agreed. "Come, we must prepare for their arrival. The fate of two species now rests on what happens in the next few hours." Nexus 7 led Commander Richard Blackwood and his team through the corridors of Harmony Station. The interior of the station was as alien as its inhabitants, with walls that seemed to pulse with light and doorways that opened by themselves as they approached. "Our central command center is this way," Nexus 7 said. "From there we can coordinate our defenses." Richard studied the damage as they walked. Some sections of the station were sealed off, emergency force fields holding back the vacuum of space. The few Lumidians they passed moved with urgency, their crystalline bodies flashing with colors that Richard assumed represented emotion. "How many of your people are on this station?" he asked. "Approximately 5,000, Nexus 7 replied. "This is our last major outpost. The collective has already consumed most of our colony worlds." They reached a large circular room filled with holographic displays, showing the approaching collective ships. 7 massive, organic-looking vessels moved steadily toward the station, their shapes unlike any spacecraft Richard had ever seen. They reminded him of deep-sea creatures with long tendrils trailing behind bulbous central bodies. 7 ships, Lisa Donovan noted, against our 4. Do not underestimate them, Nexus 7 warned. Each collective vessel carries thousands of neural parasites, capable of assimilating an entire planet's population in days. Richard studied the tactical displays. "How long until they reach us?" "Less than 2 hours," replied one of the other Lumidians. Richard activated his communicator. "Blackwood to fleet, status report." "Harbinger reports ready, Commander," came the reply. "All weapons systems modified as directed. Guardian is in position to defend the station's damaged sections. Vanguard has medical teams standing by." "Good," Richard said. "Maintain positions and await my command." He turned to Nexus 7. "Does the station have any operational defenses?" "Some," the crystalline being replied. "Our energy shields are at 60% capacity, weapon systems at 40%. Not enough to repel a full collective assault." "Then we'll have to work together," Richard decided. "Coordinate your shield frequencies with our ships. We'll create a layered defense." As the humans and Lumidians worked to prepare their defenses, Dr. Catherine Webb studied the station's database, learning more about their enemy. "The Ex-Catharis collective began as a single species," she explained to Richard during a brief break. "But they found a way to absorb the consciousness of other beings into their neural network. Each mind they take makes them stronger, adds to their knowledge." "How do they do it?" Richard asked. "Neural parasites," Catherine said. "Small organisms that attach to the victim's nervous system. Once connected, the victim's mind is copied into the collective consciousness, while their body remains as a drone." "And humans are immune somehow?" "Yes. According to the Lumidian data, our nervous systems produce chemicals that are toxic to the parasites. Our aggressive immune responses would kill the parasites before they could establish a connection." "Lucky for us," Richard muttered. The alarm sounded before they could continue their conversation. The collective ships had accelerated and would reach them in less than 30 minutes. Richard rushed back to the command center. "All ships' battle positions, prepare to engage on my mark." The view screens showed the human vessels moving into formation. The Harbinger and Sentinel took forward positions, their weapons charged and ready. The Guardian remained close to the station, its point defense systems aimed outward. The Vanguard positioned itself behind the station, ready to receive casualties. "They're launching smaller craft," Lisa reported, watching the tactical display. "Hundreds of them." The smaller organisms detached from the main collective vessels, swarming toward the station like insects. They were roughly the size of shuttlecraft, with bulbous bodies and long appendages designed to pierce hull plating. "All ships open fire," Richard commanded. The space around Harmony Station lit up with weapons fire. Beams of energy from the human ships cut through the swarm of collective organisms, vaporizing dozens with each blast. The station's remaining defense systems joined in, adding to the barrage. But there were too many. For each organism destroyed, 10 more took its place. The first wave reached the Guardian, latching onto its hull with their appendages. Guardian reports hull breaches on decks 5 through 8, Lisa shouted. They're cutting through. Redirect fire to protect the Guardian, Richard ordered. Sentinel, move to support position. The battle intensified as more collective organisms reached the defensive perimeter. The Harbinger drove straight toward the largest collective vessel, weapons blazing at full power. The alien ship absorbed the first salvos, its membrane rippling but holding. Continuous fire on the same spot, Richard ordered. Don't give it time to repair. The Harbinger's modified weapons concentrated on a single point of the collective ship, pouring radiation and heat into its biological structure. Finally, the membrane tore open, revealing the vulnerable internal systems. Now, Richard shouted. Tactical fire missiles directly into the breach. A volley of tactical nuclear missiles launched from the Harbinger, disappearing into the wound in the collective vessel. Seconds later, the alien ship erupted from within, its biological components unable to contain the radiation and heat. The explosion tore it apart, sending fragments spinning into space. One down, Lisa announced. But we've got bigger problems. Boarding parties have reached the station. Security alerts flashed across the command center displays. Collective organisms had breached Harmony Station in multiple locations, deploying the neural parasites inside. Security teams to all breach points, Richard ordered. Dr. Webb, stay with Nexus 7. Lisa, you're with me. Richard and Lisa headed toward the nearest breach, meeting up with a human security team along the way. They found the corridor ahead blocked by a makeshift barricade where a group of humans and Lumidians held position against the invaders. Beyond the barricade, Richard got his first close look at the neural parasites. They moved on multiple legs, each about the size of a small dog, with a body that seemed to be mostly brain tissue protected by a hard shell. Long tendrils extended from their front ends, designed to connect with a victim's nervous system. Standard weapons have limited effect, sir, reported a security officer. Their shells are too tough. Richard remembered what Nexus 7 had said about vulnerabilities to radiation and heat. Switch to incendiary rounds, he ordered. Aim for the tendrils, they're less protected. The security team adjusted their weapons and resumed firing. The incendiary rounds proved more effective, igniting the parasite's exposed neural tissue. But for each one they destroyed, more appeared. We need something to drive them back in large numbers, Lisa said, firing steadily at the advancing creatures. One of the Lumidians stepped forward. We may have a solution. Our communication systems use high-frequency sound waves that might be painful to the parasites. Worth a try, Richard agreed. Do it. The Lumidian adjusted a panel on the wall. A high-pitched whine filled the corridor, inaudible to human ears but visible in its effect on the parasites. They writhed and retreated, their movements becoming erratic. It's working, Lisa exclaimed. They can't stand the sound. Modify all communication systems to broadcast on that frequency, Richard ordered. We can use it to drive them back to their entry points. As the battle raged throughout the station, the tide slowly began to turn. The Guardian and Sentinel destroyed a second collective vessel. The Harbinger engaged a third. On the station, the modified sound waves pushed back the boarding parties. After 26 hours of continuous fighting, 3 collective ships had been destroyed, 2 severely damaged. The remaining 2 retreated to the system's edge, pursued by the Sentinel. In the aftermath, as human medical teams worked alongside Lumidian healers to treat the wounded, Nexus 7 approached Commander Blackwood on the observation deck of Harmony Station. You have saved what remains of our people, the crystalline being said. The collective has never been defeated so decisively. They didn't account for human ingenuity, Richard replied, or our stubbornness. We feared your kind once, Nexus 7 admitted. The galaxy calls you Deathworlders, evolved from a planet so harsh that violence is woven into your biology. but we understand now what they don't. That same evolution gave you something else, an unbreakable will to protect life, not just your own. As repairs began on Harmony Station, plans were made for a permanent human presence in the Epsilon Eridani system, the first extraterrestrial defense outpost of the United Earth Defense Force. The Lumidians offered technology far beyond human development in exchange for continued protection. And across the galaxy, word spread quickly. The Deathworlders of Earth had emerged from their solar system, and they came not as conquerors but as guardians, answering the calls that no one else would. The ex-Catharis collective retreated to the far reaches of known space, but Richard knew this wasn't over. In his final report to Earth, he included a warning. We have made both allies and enemies today. The galaxy now knows what humanity is capable of. We must be prepared for whatever comes next.